Hey guys, welcome back to Telltale. I'm Emily,
And Greg.
and we are going to be going through Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews. This just dropped on October 29th,
Mm-hmm.
so we got it on October 29th delivered
Yeah.
to our homes. This was my pick. I really wanted to try this one out. It sounded really interesting. It's a queer young adult horror fantasy, if I can throw all those genres together. I guess is
Yeah,
my
you
way of
might as
doing
well
it.
throw in what's that with Dark Academia.
Dark Academia, yes. So there's a lot going on in this story. Um, but yeah, like I think this is CG Drew's
First
first.
first fantasy novel. I looked up a little bit of research. She wrote two romance
Okay,
books.
okay. I could tell from this.
I couldn't.
Yeah, I could a little
Okay.
bit, just
Didn't
but it
feel
wasn't
didn't feel
bad.
like
It
a
wasn't bad. I typically don't like romance, but I felt like this
yeah.
was actually like very plot driven romance and very well character building. So,
See, I
so
felt like the romance was really, really low key in this.
it
You know, the way it's
was.
described as being this queer relationship, I was expecting a lot of that, and there wasn't much.
No, because a lot of it is like a lot of it is just very awkward teenagers trying to figure their shit out.
Yeah, I I
Yeah.
think I think this is
Which
a
I
book
felt
where
appropriate.
she could have just totally left out that whole aspect of it and it still would have worked.
Yeah, it still would have worked. I did like some of the plot that kind of came about though,
Hmm.
because of the inner conflict of the two queer characters.
Okay.
Um,
So
yeah.
by now people are wondering what the fuck is this about?
All right, so this. Don't let the forest in. Andrew and Thomas are besties back at school, their senior year. Andrew is so fucking in love with Thomas. He can't even handle himself. Andrew is a writer and he loves writing horror, kind of like a fairy tale fantasy horror or folkloric horror. And Thomas is an artist who is always inspired by his work. They're roommates. He draws everything his buddy writes, and vice versa. Um, so they're back at school. Andrew's twin sister, who was inseparable from the two of them, is oddly distant and just ignoring everyone and being kind of a bitch throughout the year.
But she's supposedly in a relationship
With
with
Thomas.
Thomas,
Yeah. At least that's what
but
Andrew
not. They
thinks.
had a fight
Yeah.
and
Yeah, there
I
was
don't
some
know.
kind of ambiguous fight. She's being standoffish, avoiding them, and Andrew has a really severe anxiety disorder of some kind.
Mhm.
So his sister is basically his rock. So he's just internally falling apart left and right, having panic attacks, really interesting, weird stuff. And then the horror starts happening, where the monsters that Andrew writes and Thomas draws are coming to life out of the woods and attacking the school and them.
Mhm.
These are really cool monsters. They're very original. I
Many of
liked
them
that.
are drawn in the
Yes,
book.
there's actual illustrations of some of them.
And that's my favorite part about
I
this book
do.
is all the illustrations.
Yeah.
They
I,
are
f-
great.
I feel like the monsters are really like, if you can see it, zoom in, do whatever.
I assume those were done by the same person that did the cover.
Probably. I don't know. I should have
Does it
looked that
say
up.
book designed by Meg Sayer? I'm not seeing an illustration credit.
All right.
Oh, jacket illustration by Jana Heidersdorf, and the style of the interior illustrations makes me think she did the interiors as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're pretty cool. The monsters are very original. But basically, every night at the witching hour, they have to go out and kill the monsters so they don't keep attacking the school. Thomas is terrified that Andrew's going to get killed by these things, so he starts doing it by himself. And in fact, we find out a little bit early on in the story that Thomas's entire family was wiped out by these monsters,
Mm-hmm.
before he got to school. And he's suspected of having murdered them when in fact it was these monsters that walked into his house and killed his family.
Maybe.
Maybe. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
It's told from a very unreliable narrator. So Thomas and Andrew are like trying to like figure out what they are because they're
And
roommates.
trying to stop it. They think that maybe the monsters
Yeah.
come into existence when Thomas draws them, and so
Mhm.
they destroy all of his
his writing stuff,
sketchbooks.
or his sketchbooks, and then Andrew starts kind of realizing, but they're inspired by my stories. So they start, they go and buy a hatchet and just hack bird monsters at night. And of course, they're seniors in school, so they're failing every class because they're not getting any sleep.
Mm-hmm.
One Andrew's just an absolute mess. He's like basically stopped eating and skeletal by the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, and I don't
No
know that I want.
spoilers.
Yeah, I don't want to give spoilers for this. I don't. There's some interesting parts. I liked the kind of trying to figure out the romantic relationship between them, and them trying to figure out the romantic relationship between them, especially in like this dire situation of like, we might not survive this. Like, do we tell each other we love each other and ruin everything? Are we trauma bonded? What are we? Kind of thing. Which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
The whole anxiety disorder that Andrew has is just really interesting too. I think that's a good plot device. But he has some really great moments of like stepping outside of himself for Thomas's sake and that sort of thing. So I personally enjoyed this book, for a young adult book. I liked how dark it was. Like, I wish I had read this when I was in high school, because this was so up my little emo kid alley. It was perfect.
Okay.
Um, but of course, back then I wasn't into horror yet. Didn't know I was. But this is really good. It's very gory, very gruesome, really
Mm-hmm.
cool. It's very poetic. I felt like it was very poetically written.
Okay.
But there were some downfalls that we will discuss. Greg has more downfalls with it than I do. One of them is design related that we can both agree on.
Yeah, I'll cover that one first. Go ahead and
Yeah.
hold your page up since
Look
you're
at that. So there's writing
white script type, very thin script,
on black.
reversed out of black on paper that is fairly absorbent.
Mm-hmm.
So my eyes had a really, really, really bad
It was a
struggle
struggle even
trying
for
to
me
read
to
those
read.
pages.
Yeah, it was a struggle even for me to read. Like, it took a lot of time to try and read these parts because
Yeah,
it's a cool concept, but unfortunately, legibility was sacrificed on the altar of cool, and
yeah,
it made it very
and those
uncool.
are specifically supposed to be Andrew's notebook pages with
Yeah,
his stories on.
yeah. So these are his original stories throughout that you're finding.
So yeah, get ready to really struggle with those pages. There
Mhm.
aren't a huge number of them, but there's enough that it
Yeah.
was annoying to try and read them.
It was quite a chore, and the halftone dots made it
So,
worse. It is also
graphic designer, if you're
textured.
watching this,
Yeah. It's not even
don't do
just
that.
black, it's textured. It's a textured background that's
Well, that's
floral,
the
and you can't
paper.
even see it.
That's the paper. They're not
No, no, no.
printing
There's
it.
vines. See? Vine
Oh,
there.
good Lord.
Yeah, there's vines and texture too that's fighting
They sure
against
didn't
that.
come through very well.
No, no.
Lots of bad choices there.
Yeah.
Sorry. We're
Hmm.
both
Though
graphic
I did like,
designers. That's
yeah,
not
I did
good.
like the little blood splatters on
Yeah,
them.
that's cool.
Like, or ink splatters, whatever they're supposed to be. Could go either way with
Yeah, it
this
could be
story.
whatever you want.
Yeah, blood, ink, doesn't matter. There's a lot of both in here.
Chlorophyll.
Chlorophyll. Could be chlorophyll. A little plant juice. But yeah.
Okay,
So yeah, go
that's
for it.
just the first. Okay.
Tear it apart, Greg.
Uh,
I know you wanna.
the first thing, and it surprised me that you liked it
Mm-hmm.
because it has the emotionalism of Wuthering Heights.
It kind of does, yeah.
It's very much that overly dramatic, romanticist, um, the kind of over emotionalism that makes you gag.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I
and
get that.
both Thomas and Andrew at different points, I just wanted to slap them and say and tell them to grow a
Yeah.
bit because they were acting
Fucking
so.
communicate, you dumb ass.
They were just being
Yeah.
so dumb.
Mhm. Yeah. Awkward teenage. I chopped that up to awkward teenagers, and like, Andrew does have an anxiety disorder. Like, he's got severe mental health issues. He's the unreliable narrator of this whole thing.
Hmm.
So, and it's not unusual. Like, yeah, he's super needy and stuff like that. I know that was one of the pieces of feedback we
They
discussed
were
prior
both
to.
needy and they were both
Super
codependent.
codependent. Yeah. So yeah, super
which,
retarded.
I mean, that made me just not like the characters. I
Got it.
just didn't like the characters.
Hmm.
And that kind of put a cloud over the whole story.
See, I kind of liked it because I'm like, oh my gosh, they're both train wrecks. How does this go up in flames? Like, it's kind of that sick fascination of, oh, this is gonna be so fucked.
Okay.
That's what I was expecting.
I did love the monsters. When the
Hmm.
monsters came into the picture, those parts were great.
Yeah.
The book moved along really good and was well written as far as being a gripping story. You know, the
Hmm.
scenes moving along really nice and flowing into one another. It has a
Hmm.
good structure, has a good plot throughout.
Hmm.
It was a joy to read that way, but didn't like the characters. And, well, I hate high school.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
I
any
don't think
book.
anybody who loves high school has something wrong with them, to be
But
honest.
I hate high school to the point where I don't like reading books. I don't like
Hmm.
TV shows. I don't like movies
Dark
about
academia is
teenagers.
not your thing.
Um, my teenage years were bad enough, and that's another thing with me is that I'm not like either of these characters, but there's enough of what they talk about of feeling isolated, feeling
Hmm.
um having people bully them, having people call them names, having people push them around. I've been through all those experiences, and um, it made me just avoid everyone.
Hmm.
Okay, I didn't have relationships. I didn't have girlfriends or boyfriends or anything. I
Hmm.
didn't have friends. I
Yeah.
didn't join clubs. I wasn't doing,
Yeah.
I avoided everything because of what I went through. And then there is a an assumption about people who are
Hmm.
shy and quiet and go through that kind of trauma in their childhood that they become serial killers and
Yeah.
they're all
It's
screwed
always the
up and
quiet ones.
psychotic
Yeah.
and it's just not true.
Hmm.
Okay, that whole characterization, which is really central to this book, is just not true about those people.
Hmm.
It's just not accurate.
Yeah.
I don't feel the author really understood her characters.
Yeah. And I see, I was kind of the opposite. I loved that the quiet ones were dangerous. I loved that people assumed because I was a quiet one, I was dangerous.
Mm,
It made people leave me alone, especially
okay,
in high school.
where are the bodies?
Yeah, don't.
Okay,
You
so
don't know
I mean,
nothing.
I just,
Yeah, no, I get
I
that.
just felt like the author
Hmm.
um, made the characters made the characters shoehorn them into the story
Hmm.
rather than letting the story being driven by
Hmm.
the realities of that type of character.
Yeah. I do think I have a very different experience because I have a brother who had an anxiety disorder. I felt like Andrew was extremely realistic for someone with an anxiety disorder. Um, you do become codependent. Like my brother and I had issues when I was really young. I couldn't even be out of his sight for a second without him having a panic attack. So I felt like those relationships where Andrew's twin and him not having access to her as much made him feel very isolated, gave him a lot more panic, a lot more anxiety. And then Thomas being aloof at the beginning of the book when he wasn't communicating what was going on because he didn't think anybody would believe him about the monsters. Like Andrew was feeling so isolated and just an absolute mess of a human being. I felt like that really was characterized well for how anxiety feels and the experience of the codependency that people with anxiety disorders develop, because my brother and I were both very codependent when we were younger. um Mine was more because of the conditioning of his condition. Like I just knew Paul just can't be away from me for very long, or he can't not see mom and dad. Like mom and dad can't even go into the living room from the kitchen if he's still in the kitchen. He has to come with them or he'll have panic attacks kind of situations.
Hmm.
So it's very severe. The fact that he wasn't medicated though really pissed me off. Like that is debilitating.
Yeah.
Somebody get this kid some fucking meds. This is ridiculous. Ah. But yeah,
And the other problem I have, without spoiling it,
yeah,
there's a twist at the end. I saw it from the start.
yeah.
It was just too obvious to
I
me.
knew it was gonna be a twist, but I didn't. I did not predict correctly what the twist was. I knew something was up with that particular character, but I did not correctly guess how that happened. So I was like, I knew it was coming or something was coming, and I wasn't unpleasantly surprised by it. But yeah, I did kind of feel that that was predictable.
Yeah.
Um and
And the other thing we disagree on is that this being a YA book, I think it's dangerous to have this kind of a tragic story um, being presented to kids in the light that this is. Because, yeah, everybody has a dark side, but you don't want to feed it.
yeah. Well,
That's dangerous.
you don't want to feed it, yeah, but in this case, they were expressing it through their writing and their art. It just happened to cause actual violence, which is, I
Yeah.
think, a healthy way of dealing with your inner darkness. Also, I found it refreshing in a world where we have a lot of false positivity, where it's like, oh, just think positive. Everything's got to be beautiful. No, sometimes life really fucking sucks, and anxiety disorders really fucking suck. Having parents who ignore you and are negligent really fucking sucks.
I know, but
Um,
that sort of thing, adults can handle it. And maybe teenagers can handle it. Some can, some can't. But
mhm,
you still want to present them with solutions, not just present them with stuff that basically tells them go down that dark side
mhm.
as far as you can.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
I
it gets
don't.
too dark
Yeah. I
without
think
any light to it.
when I think young adult, I think teenagers. And when I think teenagers, like I feel like it's an insult to their intelligence because there are a lot of really smart teenagers who get a lot of satire and they get concepts of extremes. In this case, I felt like the solution was they solved it themselves. They did solve the issue.
But
Was
their
violence.
solutions were illegal. Let's put it
Yeah,
that way.
illegal and violent. Um, but we also have the concept of an unreliable narrator. Did that actually happen? Or was he just having schizophrenic episodes about how to resolve it? And they really did resolve it. Like, were the monsters even real? Is Thomas even real? Like, you start wondering, like, how could this larger than life character even be real? Did he just make it up?
Mhm.
Like, so you kind of have this unreliable narrator who has this anxiety disorder who kind of at the beginning of the book starts seeing things that you're like, is that even really there? Or is he just making that up because he's scared?
Mhm.
Kind of situation. Um, and like, I felt like the desperation of the situation, though, feeling like those monsters were real, getting sleep deprived because they were going out and fighting them, not ever having a regulated nervous system, not having consistent sleep, not having those normal things that kids their age should need in order to grow and develop their brains. I feel like they still were able to solve the problem the best they could. So I do feel like it was actually
I still
remarkably
feel like it's
helpful.
it's too much like telling kids who are suicidal that suicide is the right solution.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
it be dark, but this goes too far.
Yeah. I think it's because of the circumstances. I think if the monsters hadn't become, quote unquote, hadn't become real, they still would have just expressed their inner darkness through their artwork. And that would have been perfectly normal and fine.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but
It was
I
the desperation that took it to the next level.
yeah,
Hmm.
I still just think as realistic as it is that there are kids who go down this path into where Andrew goes.
Hmm.
I don't think you should present that in fiction in a way that has kids identifying with it too
Hmm.
much because he goes the wrong direction.
Hmm. But maybe kids could understand that.
They can understand it, but you want to
You don't
show
want them
you
to feel like they have permission.
yeah, you don't want to
Hmm.
glorify and glamorize that.
But I think that's, again, the discernment of the person's responsibility, not necessarily the discernment of an author's responsibility. I think you're putting rough to say that if a kid chooses to do that with a book like this, they were probably just a bad kid. Like, or their parents failed them in some manner or whatever, but responsibility needs to be put on the correct person. Someone
True.
actually making the choices to cause this to happen in real life and not see it as a fiction and not see that it's a mess and not see that this is a train wreck. That is their choice and they need to be responsible for it. I don't think authors should be responsible for that.
That's a logical position,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not a real world position. In reality, a lot of kids like this, there is nobody there for them.
Mm-hmm. I
And
get that.
so a book like this is just throwing fuel on the fire.
It could be, yes. But that's a risk you take as an artist, too. I don't think we need to censor that kind of artistry
No,
by
not
any
censor it,
means. Yeah.
but
You wouldn't have put this in the young adult, John.
I would have called this an adult book.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I think this is a book that should only be read with the teenagers and their parents so that they can talk about it
Mm-hmm.
and talk
Or in
about
a
the
classroom
feelings
setting,
protected.
even.
If the
Book
kids
club setting.
identify with anything going on in this book, you
Mm-hmm.
need to make sure they get help
Yeah.
and make sure they understand the real world situation.
Mm-hmm.
And, ultimately, I know this is never going to happen, but ultimately, parents need to be on their kids' side.
Oh, yeah, they do. They do. Absolutely. That makes a huge difference.
I told that to my brother when my niece was having some problems. I said, just make sure she knows you're always on her side.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one biggest thing she needs.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the number one thing most kids don't get.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of parents who fail their children.
Hmm.
And we don't get to decide that though. But we do get to decide as like I'm not that far from being a young adult, you know. So it's one of those things where it's like I realize that my decisions and my reactions to things were entirely my responsibility.
Hmm.
Yeah, people could egg me on, things could influence me, but it was my job as the influenced to
Yeah.
start having better discernment and recognize.
I guess in the end, what got me through was books by Arthur Clarke, Robert Heinlein, that
Hmm.
gave me a sense that there is possibilities for the future.
Oh yeah. And you're more of an ideas kind of reader. You like that concept
But
of ideas.
even just
Hmm.
their characters. Robert Heinlein wrote a lot of juveniles like Space
Hmm.
Cadet,
Yeah.
and just seeing that possibility of the future maybe being a better place where
Hmm.
and moving into adulthood that things would be different
Hmm.
is one of the things that kept me going.
Yeah, I think that's wise.
And so I think books like that are what
Hmm.
teenagers should be looking for because it,
Hmm.
it will help them get through their problems.
Yeah. But again, I also want to go back, like when we talked about why horror appeals to people. I think this
Yeah.
would be a good case of Schadenfreude, being glad you're not them, the
Hmm.
shit's not happening to you, and you're not the one who's losing sleep your senior year and fucking up your future because of monsters and a guy. So
Yeah, well, I mean,
there is that.
maybe that goes farther, but there were
Mm-hmm.
too many things that I did,
Mm-hmm.
that did connect with my own experience
Hmm.
that it
You're like,
was
oh,
it
that could
was
have been
very
bad.
troubling, and I
Mm-hmm.
just felt, I mean, when I was a young adult, I was looking to bury my feelings and not feel those things and
Mm-hmm.
and destroy those monsters,
Mm-hmm.
and this book just brings them all out.
Yeah. And in my case, I was one of those kids with inner darkness who wanted to befriend my monsters because they probably weren't going away. So I just was like, okay, I deal with these emotions. I have depression. I have anxiety. I have these things that give me dark thoughts and feelings all the time. But the fact of the matter is, I can choose otherwise. Not that I can choose not to suddenly have depression, but I can choose not to kill myself or hurt myself. I can choose sometimes if I don't feel like living for myself, I can choose to live for other people if that's what keeps me going.
But you can't choose to kill the people that are giving you the depression. That's the problem here.
Can't live with them, can't kill them with an axe. And this one they did. The monsters got killed with an
Exactly.
axe. Um, but yeah, that's true. But again, it comes down to those choices and realizing that some things are illegal.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, you can make the choice, but you will suffer the consequences of it forever,
Exactly.
kind of thing. So it's just recognizing that don't make a permanent choice for a temporary status. Um, but yeah,
Yeah. So I got
so I liked this
I
book.
got issues with it. It was overall a good first effort.
Mm-hmm.
I think this author has the possibility of doing some excellent work in the future.
Mm-hmm.
I think this one has some problems
Oh yeah.
that could have been worked out.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been a much better, much stronger story.
Yeah, I think so too.
Some more thought and some work.
Yeah, I still really liked it for what it was. I took it very much at face value, recognizing what I recognized in it, and I felt like it was really well done. I liked how poetic it was.
Hmm.
That this writer just really channeled the poetic phrasings that an actual writer, like the Andrew character is, would have said in as an internal monologue. Um, and the imagery was just really well done. Not just the illustrations, but the word pictures that were built, and the world
Hmm.
building was really well done as well. So
Hmm.
very interesting, complex characters. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I like
Okay.
dark stuff though. It
Well,
never
I like
bothers
dark
me.
stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff doesn't bother me. I've been reading a
You're
lot of
just
Stephen
concerned about the youths.
Well, just I
Yeah.
just know where I was at that age, and I know that is not a book that would have done anything good for me.
Yeah. And I think that's actually wise to say because I think a lot of people can't just choose not to. They
Hmm.
feel like they are so reactionary that they can't emotionally regulate. So I think that's wise to say, parents, if you're gonna have your kid read this, scan it yourself first and make sure it's
Yeah.
something you actually think your kid should be reading, especially if you think your kid is in a dark place. You
Hmm.
don't want suicide to be the next thing that happens.
Well, suicide or going and shooting up a school.
Yeah, for
We've
real.
had a lot of that, and it's because those kids are backed into a corner where they see that as their
Only
only option.
option.
And we need to
Hurt
make
them
sure
back.
that those kids realize they have other options.
Yes.
But then we need to give them those other
Yes,
options.
mental health
Just,
is
you
important.
know,
Actually, I feel like that's the whole freaking theme of this book.
yeah.
Dealing with your shit and mental health is important.
Hmm.
Because not dealing with it means you face monsters so much bigger than you can handle.
But I hate that every time on the news, some kid shoots up a school, and right away the principal is saying, how, terrible that is, and how they got to, how they got to identify these kids and stop them before they get, and
Hmm.
what about all the things that pushed them there
Yes.
that you are ignoring
The
and doing jack shit
choices,
about?
yes, the choices of the other students who put them in that position. Yes,
And
being able to give,
the
yeah,
adults who are letting kids be bullies and
yeah.
going, oh, that's just
And the
kids being
adults who
kids.
let their kid just steal their gun.
Hmm.
Like, freaking better, yeah, better gun security at your house, man.
Hmm.
Whatever.
Kids should be able to
Yeah,
go to school and feel totally secure.
yeah, yeah. They
And
shouldn't be
it's
scared to go to school.
the parents and administrators and teachers that
Hmm.
could create that environment, and they
Yes,
don't.
yes, yes.
And that's why there's school shootings.
Hmm. Because we need to realize that, yeah, survival of the fittest may have been Darwin's theory, but we are rational beings. We have every
This is a
capacity.
society.
Yeah, we have
It's not
every
survival of the
capacity
fittest.
to
It's
live
all
in
of us
harmony.
working together.
Yeah,
That's how societies work.
yeah.
None of us, I guarantee, none of us could survive 100% on our own.
Nope. We need to have relationships in order to be able to survive. Yeah,
And so
that's
we
all I
need to
have to
work
say
together.
about. Yeah, that's all I have to
Okay.
say about this without getting
Yeah.
into more tangents. But yeah, this is a really interesting read.
Yeah. Good book if you read it
Not a tutorial,
understanding
but
what it is.
yeah,
And
can recommend with caution
yeah,
from the Telltale standpoint. But yeah, that's all I gotta say.
that's all I got.
It's
So have
pretty.
you read Don't Let the Forest In? If you have, leave your comments about any of the subjects we've brought up in this video.
Hmm.
And please hit the like button and subscribe button and come on back for lots more books and authors of this nature.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.